speak to approval and approval-seeking behavior. But let's speak to how threat and this low-level anxiety that we are experiencing as adults impacts our ability to relate openly and fully in relationship, to be ourselves, to feel safe. Because when we feel threatened because of unresolved issues, when we feel threatened in our psyche and in the dynamics that are playing out in our lives, in our relationships, we act differently. And sometimes what we will do is we will seek approval. We will seek the external validation of others outside of ourselves. We will want them to like us. We will behave in a particular way. We may extend ourselves, go above and beyond to get that smile, to gain that confirmation, to receive that loving gesture, to be spoken of in high regard. And what we're really doing is avoiding this sense of rejection, this fear that we have of being abandoned, of being left alone, of being humiliated, of not being seen for who we are. And as we continue to cycle through the avoidance of this fear of not wanting to be left alone or to be seen or viewed as someone that's less than, and we'll talk a moment into where does this potentially come from, and how does it continue to compound and act out in our lives. But this approval-seeking behavior, it leads to us feeling constantly threatened. Our sense of self is threatened. Our identity is threatened, particularly in relationships. So we have to wear these masks. And we put these masks on over who we truly wish to be because we are scared to be seen for who we are. Because what if who we are is not approved of? And so hence the approval-seeking behavior. We may look to our lovers for validation, validating our actions. Maybe you come home and you see the house is a little of a mess and you think to yourself, I want to clean this up. I want to make sure that my partner's happy. Pause there for a moment. Where's that really coming from? Now, there's nothing wrong, of course, with wanting to help, wanting to contribute in the relationship, wanting to create equity, knowing that maybe your partner has had a stressful day or is doing a lot in their life at the moment and you want to ease some of that burden. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's healthy. But what's the come from? Is there a part of you, is there a voice inside of you that feels less than if you're not contributing, or that you need them? Key here, need them to see you in a particular way. Are you trying too hard in a conversation to make them like you, to make them see you in a particular way? Are you holding back your opinion, your beliefs, your expression so that people do not dislike you? If you're dealing with someone that's important to you, so maybe it's a boss, a friend, a partner, your wife, your husband, if you're dealing with someone that means something to you, who has some form of power, some form of sway or influence in your life, how are you choosing to behave? Is there a low-level anxiety that you're experiencing, that you're feeling as you interact with them on a more regular basis? This approval-seeking behavior, this tension that we feel, this feeling of being threatened, we never are able to be ourselves in relationship. People feel that. And people are often also repelled by that, because as a result of feeling threatened, we feel and become desperate in our actions. We become clingy, we become needy. We don't become confident. And for a man, not being confident in his self, not being confident in his posturing, in his actions in the world, in who he is and who he really truly wants to be, that can be so damaging. This anxiety, this feeling of unworthiness, this feeling of I'm going to be deeply abandoned unless I behave in a way that this person approves of. it not only limits the expression of the relationship, it not only damages the core trust and authenticity that can be exchanged and honesty that can be exchanged in the relationship. What tends to happen is we find ourselves backtracking, not trusting who we are. So if you're that person that's seeking approval, that doesn't feel competent in their own selves, that feels you're not good enough, and you seek that good enough outside of yourself, what tends to happen is you lose so much of who you are. You lose so much of your power in relationship, and you give it away. And people feel that. People feel that anxiety that you're feeling, and they feel that you're attempting to mask that anxiety, to you're almost holding your breath, waiting for them to give you the golden ticket of approval to be yourself. And that's a big responsibility to place on someone else. And so this feeling of just being threatened, maybe you're apologizing too much, maybe you're making jokes that aren't really funny to elicit a very specific, particular response. Maybe you're acting extra nice when not so much that you don't want to, but it comes across as fake. When you forego your own preferences, when you sacrifice yourself, minimize who you are and maximize others at your expense. What is that saying about you? This desperate, unconscious desire for others' approvals, it creates a behavior within you that actually really not forces but prompts people to like you less, or they're not as drawn to you because you're not being real, you're not being authentic, you're not being yourself. And this is more implicit than explicit, and this feeling of being threatened, it comes from a very young age. It comes from pain, childhood trauma that you've experienced. When your needs weren't met, when you weren't seen the way you needed to be seen, when you weren't heard the way you needed to be heard, when you were crying for too long and you made that mean that no one loved you, when you were consistently potentially told that you're not good enough, and you were shown that you weren't shown the attention and the love that you needed in order to flourish as a human being. And so this constant feeling of your sovereignty being threatened, this fear of rejection, abandonment, not being liked, not being approved of, being humiliated, it drives this need to seek validation from others, but it's a constant cycle. We need more of it because it doesn't last. It may last a moment, may last a few days, but then we become anxious again, and that low-level anxiety and feeling of being threatened comes back. And so whilst there are many paths that we need to take in order to begin to heal this part of ourselves, inner child work, healing the feeling and the unfelt feelings of the past, it also must begin in the moment when you feel yourself contorting yourself. You feel that anxiousness in your body. Pause for a moment. Engage in some slow rhythmic breathing. Ask yourself this question. Where is this feeling, this need to impress others coming from? What is the fear that I'm avoiding? And yes, you may have to feel that fear temporarily. You may have to feel that fear for a short period of time in order to move through it, because we don't feel freedom until we feel our unfelt, unresolved pain, trauma, feelings, unexpressed feelings. That's a big part, big moving part to the puzzle, right? The mechanics that is us. That's a big piece of the puzzle. And so you're going to constantly feel threatened in relationship. You're going to constantly feel less than and anxious in relationship, and that will cause you to behave in a way that comes from desperation and insecurity until you begin to build that confidence. But ask some of those big questions and face some of those big fears and know that you are enough and you are worthy as you are. But someone else telling you that doesn't matter, because otherwise you're just falling back into that cycle of seeking approval or seeking validation or seeking something, wisdom from someone else outside of yourself, when it really resides within yourself.